Welcome to the speaker series on a shot glass of recovery.
Yeah. Yeah. You get a house, you get a car, then you start thinking that's all you are, but you don't know the truth. So let me spell it out for you. Now I got your attention, now there's a start. Now sit and listen to my favorite part. Life's been giving us some clues. The answer lies inside of you.
Welcome to the speaker series on a shot glass of recovery. Hi, I'm your host, Lisa M. Thanks for joining me again. Just a quick reminder to subscribe, like, or follow if you like the show on any of your favorite listening platforms. If you like the speakers and other content on the podcast, please show us some love by leaving a review and consider making a PayPal contribution to help keep the show going at paypal.me/a shot glass of recovery. Every dollar makes a difference, and we thank you. Our speakers come from my AA home group, AA Solution Seekers. We meet every day at 7 a.m., so pop in sometime and say hello. Until then, here is more experience, strength, and hope from one of our guests' lips to your speakers.
And it's Mark S., and I'm alcoholic. I love the statement that how do we use the solution of Alcoholics Anonymous? How do we do that? And to show the newcomer. And so I'll try to do that. My experience in Alcoholics Anonymous is kind of a global experience. I'm not the guy that came into AA and stayed in one location with one home group and never moved. Mine is a very, very broad AA all across the globe. So our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like. I'll try to cover that. What happened and what it's like now. So I'm just a dirt poor Minnesota farm kid. I grew up way, way, way north in the United States. The closest large city would have been Winnipeg, Canada, and pretty frigid, cold country up there, flat farmland. And everybody up there is Norwegian. They're all Lutheran. They're pretty good folks. And that's where I grew up. I grew up to good folks, got a couple of brothers. There's no serious alcoholism in the family. Maybe a few relatives that drank a little too much, got arrested once in a while. But I don't know of many immediate members that were, or family members that were in Alcoholics Anonymous. A distant relative who was quite active. But I'm alcoholic. So a little bit like Bill Wilson, my parents didn't separate, but his parents had separated, and he was raised by his grandfather Griffiths, and he just didn't feel right. He suffered from a lot of depression. He had a lot of hardship. If you read his story and pass it on, you'll get a indication of Bill's early part of life and kind of that. He wanted so much to enjoy a certain opinion of himself, but he knew in his heart he didn't deserve it. And I had a bit of that, a bit of the rejection, a bit of the shame. I'm not worthy stuff. So Bill, through a number of things, would try to prove that he could be a number one man. And I did a lot of that myself. I just need to prove that I'm worthy, that I'm okay. And I had some birth defects that were going to probably bother me if I got a real working man's kind of job. And so the doctors had told my mother that he should get a pencil pushing job because if he doesn't, he's going to be laid up by the time he's 40. So I was a good student and I threw myself into schoolwork, and I was going to be a professional type rather than like everybody else in my family. I can give you my last name and I'll still be anonymous. My name is Mark Smith. Google that one and see what you find. You'll find everybody on the planet, but you won't find me. I am not just low profile. I'm no profile. I'm not on media anywhere. But yeah, and so everybody in my family is kind of a Smith type. They're very working with their hands kind of guys. But like I say, I was a good student. And I wasn't only going to be a good student, I was going to be the best student. No matter what it is, I'm going to beat you. You can count on that. And just very competitive in that regard. And so there's a story, you've heard it, I'm sure, but about some guys who'd been camping and they They were very, very tired. They'd been walking a long ways. They came around the edge of a mountainside, and there in a clearing stood a very large bear. And they were just exhausted. And well, one of them dropped to his knees. He rummaged through his backpack and he pulled out a pair of tennis shoes and started putting them on. The other guy said, "What are you going to do?" And he said, "I'm going to run." And he said, "You can't outrun that bear." And he said, "I know, but all I got to do is outrun you. And that's all I have to do in life. I just got to outrun you because you'll give up." A lot of people just give up and they said, "Oh, Mark, I'm not going to do that." And I kind of learned that early on, that people will give up. And if I don't give up, I'll prevail. And so I worked really, really hard and threw myself into a lot of schoolwork. And yeah, I graduated top of my class, valedictorian, all that good kind of stuff. Picture in the yearbook of all this good, wonderful stuff I was doing. But you got to remember, I'm restless, I'm irritable, I'm discontented, and I want some ease. And I can get that by achievement or a lot of other things. And somewhere around age 16, I discovered alcohol. And when I drank alcoholically. I would drink to excess. If I could get it, I'd drink to excess. And that went on from age 16 through 21. Remember, I'm a good student. I'm not stupid. I'm not insane. I work real, real hard and I'm focused. But man, I'm off the hook when I drink. And by age 21, it was legal in Minnesota. I had a college degree. I had a strong belief in God of my understanding. And I said, "Thank you very much." And I went off to see the wizard. And at age 21, I switched from drinking alcoholically to becoming an alcoholic. And that went on for another 25 years till I was 46. And I look back on it, and it didn't have to be that way, but it was. And I took job after job, city after city, town after town, place after place, and a lot of geographics, more education, more initials after my name. I'm well educated. I'm highly accredited, plenty of initials after my name, and not insane. But I've got this particularly strange idea that maybe I can put alcohol in my body and this time it's going to be okay. And that's just a little bit cray cray. I'm not all gone, but I'm not all there. And so it always plagued me. I was going to be an engineer because I was real good in math. And then I switched to, I was going to be a lawyer. And so I took classes in a law exam. And then I decided, no, I'm better in numbers. And so I decided to be an accountant and went that route. And that just took me all over the place. I took a job for the federal government, moved all around the United States, and it was a girl in every port and a bar in every town. And I sent my folks a card one time and I said, "I haven't been in one bar since I got to town, and I'm going to that one now," because I'd been in every other bar. And I drank because I probably was restless. I probably was irritable. I probably was discontented. And I got that sense of ease and comfort when I took a few drinks of alcohol. I don't know if I got real comfort, but maybe a sense of ease and comfort. Drinks what others took with impunity. And so what happened? Well, a blur. I don't remember music from the 80s. Was there any? I don't remember. I don't remember music from the 90s. It's just kind of a blur. I was there, but it's just, I remember a lot of stuff. Like say, I've got a good mind, but there's just stuff. Wonder what that's all about. And that drinking went on until age 46. And I got to it. The last few years were not good. And I started harvesting the high cost of low living. And I started getting consequences. And I didn't much like them. And finally, I got arrested in Greater Detroit. And yeah, that didn't go well. And so I was arrested in like middle of February, 1998. And I felt so bad about it. It took me until July 6th of 98, 5 months or so, to go to an AA meeting. And I got a lot of consequences. Like say, I didn't like them. Court fines, loss of license, loss of insurance, loss of my wife's insurance, seeing a counselor, community service, and ordered to these AA meetings. And you don't understand. I'm real independent, notoriously independent, and I don't want to go to these meetings. And I didn't. And finally they said, well, you haven't gone to meetings. You got to make them up. And so they told me I had to go to 4 a week. So I was kind of stuck. I finally wandered into my first meeting. Actually, the first 2 meetings I sat in the car. I was allowed to drive a car only to AA meetings, and only in 2 counties in Michigan, and only during daylight hours. It was pretty confining for a guy that traveled a lot all over the U.S. And it just wasn't good. And I went into my first AA meeting, and some folks didn't talk about alcohol, and I was ready to walk right out of there because I don't identify. They weren't talking about stuff to me that is controversial. But when they kept their comments confined to their problems with alcohol, I could relate right away. Said, that's me. I'm just like that. I drink like that. My title on my business card for many years said controller. I'm a chief financial officer, have a very good job and still working. But I'm a controller. Controller. And you can't control your drinking? Yeah, I was beat up from the inside out. It just really hurt. And so to enjoy and control our drinking is a great obsession of every abnormal drinker. And I just couldn't seem to control it. I would drink to excess. What's wrong with me? And so I came into the meetings of AA, and I sat down deep in the seats, and I found out about this allergy of the body and this obsession of the mind. And I did the typical 90 days, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, problem shared, problem cut in half. And if you don't talk about what you're thinking about, you'll drink about what you're thinking about. And, just a lot of stuff that it was meant to be good, but it wasn't the great solution our book talks about. So, okay, so you're alcoholic and you come into AA and you've got some consequences. So what does all that mean? Well, on July 6, 1998, I had taken my last drink, and I came into a meeting, and I was court ordered, and I sat down deep in the seats, and I listened, and I learned. And after doing that for a while, I started seeing the difference between the people who were actually working the program and those that weren't, and those that read the book and those that weren't. And I liked it. And I said, you know what, I'm going to, in fact, I'd hear stuff and I didn't think that was right. And I said, I'm going to go look that up in the book. And so I started reading the book, and I didn't read the book a little. I read it a lot, and I didn't read it alone. I started reading it with people that had a phenomenal command of the book. And I remember step 1, admitted we're powerless over alcohol. Oh yeah. Long hyphen, no and, long hyphen, that our lives have become unmanageable. If you read the big book, you'll find out that Bill loves to repeat himself, and he does that several ways. One is a long hyphen. It was the old insidious insanity, long hyphen. It doesn't mean and, the first drink. Just highlight your book every time you see a long hyphen, the M dash, and you'll find out it doesn't mean and. It usually means, let me say it another way. And he repeats himself. And then he uses words of 3: cunning, baffling, powerful, restless, irritable, discontented, happy, joyous, free. He repeats. He does it all through the book. Just underline the time you find, when you find words of 3, sometimes words of 4. He's just making a point, reemphasizing a point, and then putting it another way. He does it in the 4th and 5th steps about nature of our wrongs, defects of character. He's saying the same thing. He's just using different words to just hammer it into our heads, to smash home that what we should understand. So, well, why do you think you're alcoholic? Well, if we're not sure, page 44. In the preceding chapters, Mark, you've learned something of alcoholism. Sure I have. We hope we made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. I think I forgot. Would you tell me again? Sure. If, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, yeah, I got that. That's an obsession, a thought which replaces all other thoughts. Or, not and, if when drinking, you've had little control over the amount you take. I got that too. I drink to excess. That's that craving. You may be alcoholic. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness, which only a spiritual experience will conquer. I might be that far gone. I might be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. Hey, going to 90 and 90 might not do it. Getting the best sponsor around might not do it. Doing all kinds of service work might not do it. I might need to do an entire psychic change, this profound change. I see. And so page 44, yeah, I'm big on that page, that first paragraph. And then so step 1, we admitted we're powerless over alcohol. Yep. I don't get into controversial matters. It says, does not wish to engage in any controversy. When in doubt, leave it out. I can go to any AA meeting in the world and say, my name's Mark and I'm alcoholic. Nothing after that. And people identify right away. Once I start tagging on other words, you're probably raising controversy to someone somewhere. When in doubt, leave it out. And I don't need to chase an alcoholic out of a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. But it's broad, roomy, and open. I understand. We confine our comments to those who relate to alcoholism. Do I have other maladies? Sure. You're going to hear about them in a closed meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous? Not a chance. And we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Well, that was simple. That's going to be God of Lutheran Church, Northern Minnesota. I'm fine with that concept. Never had a problem with it. Still don't. Whatever. Why don't you choose your own conception of God? Look around the rooms. Do you think that there just might be a power out there greater than yourself, which will solve your problem? Yeah, I see it happening. Well, you decide what that power is and turn your will and life over to the care of that power. Yeah. Yeah. Make a decision. Step 3. It's just a decision. Yeah, I'm going to give this a shot. So I did 1, 2, 3. Then I realized, I'm going to need a sponsor. And so I started asking people to sponsor me. I found this guy with 35 years because I wanted his time. And he said, well, I sponsor a lot of guys. And I said, yep, I understand that. That's why I want you. And he said, I'll be your temporary sponsor. Oh my God, he turned me down. I'm not good enough to be a real sponsee. I'm just a temp. Oh, I've rejected again. So then I found a guy with 20 years. He was a multimillionaire. Had a real nice ride out front of the building. And I asked him, and he was a little more blunt. And he said he'd be my temporary sponsor. Oh, shot down again. Nobody wants to sponsor me. Then I found this guy with 7 years, was an attorney, and I needed what he had because I was sure my wife was going to sue me for divorce and take away stuff. And I asked him, and son of a gun, he'll be my temporary sponsor. Why won't anybody just sponsor me? And I started working with him a little bit, but why can't I find somebody that'll sponsor me? Then I happened to be in Chicago. I had an apartment in Detroit, I had a home in Chicago, and I was an officer of several corporations. And I went to this meeting, and there was this guy there, and we were very different. I'm white, he's black. He's younger. I'm older. I'm married. He's not. I got kids. He doesn't. I wear suits and ties and corporate executive, and he's running big box stores. He grew up in the South. I grew up in the North. Very different. But man, did this guy have a command of the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And this guy was happy, and he was joyous, and he was free. And I wanted what that guy had. And I asked him to be my sponsor, and he said I'd be honored. He'd be honored to sponsor me. I've sponsored an awful lot of guys over the years. I never temporary sponsor anybody. If you ask me to be your sponsor, I'm going to take you through the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous, and help you change, or I'm not. There's nothing temporary about it. And so I always say, I'd be honored to be your sponsor. But we're going to work all the steps out of the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's just what I do. It's my experience. It's my strength. It's my hope. If you do something else, that's your call. And so I thought, oh, great. Now I can go out and tell them all that dirty, nasty, rotten stuff because I just really wanted to do a 5th step. And he said, no. We're not going to do this bleeding 5th step where you're going to come and bleed all over me. You go back and do a proper 4th step like it's laid out in the big book, and then I'll hear your 5th step. So I got out my big book and I went to the back and I tore out the sheets in the back that show how to do a 4th step. And he said, wait a minute. There's no tear out sheets in the back of the big book. There's not. Well, wait a minute. I thought this was a real deal. Why don't they have some tear out forms? So that got me into a little contempt after some investigation. Why can't they just have a standard form? Well, there isn't one. And I called the central office twice, and they said, no, there's not really an official form. There's many forms out there, but we suggest you talk to your sponsor. We suggested you check with your home group and that kind of stuff that AA would tell you. And so I complained about it enough that one week I ended up getting one electronic format and two handwritten copies. And I figured, all right, well, I can't fuss about that anymore. So it tells me in the big book, it says, though our decision, step 3, was a vital and important step. Yeah. Decision, step 3, could have little permanent effect. It's a terrible place to stay. Little permanent effect, unless at once followed by a strenuous effort. I, Mark, have to do something. If I want to be part of the we, I have to do something. We of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Oh, that's the we. If you, Mark, want what we have, then you're willing to take certain steps. And so if I want to get part of the we, maybe I got to actually do something. So I did that. And it says a strenuous effort to face steps 4 and 5 and be rid of steps 6 and 7, the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Oh, I'm alcoholic. I believe there's a power. I've become willing to turn my life over to the care of that power, but I'm going to be blocked. Wow, I'm going to be blocked. And I got to find out what's been blocking me. Yeah, our liquor's but a symptom. We got to get down to causes and conditions. So the book says, I want you to look at some conditions. I want you to look at the resentful condition and get down to the causes. I want you to look at the fearful condition and get down to some causes. I want you to look at that sexual condition and get down to some causes. And if you've been thorough, on the second to the last page of how it works, it'll say, we've listed persons we've harmed. Some people think there's a fourth inventory. I got a list of people I've harmed, and look at the harms and get down to the causes. And I worked across those columns. Column 1, it tells me many times how to do the 4th step. It tells me once in narrative. It tells me twice in narrative. It tells me what a format. And then it tells me, it says, once I've done that for resentments, why can't I use the same form for fear? We looked at her fears. We looked at her sex conduct, looked at harms. Just use the same format. And I worked across those. And I got to that point. It says, we turn back to the list, for it held the key to our future. There's something on that list that holds a key to my future. I got to look at these conditions and get down to causes. And I worked across that very thoroughly and with a lot of work. And I found out behind all my resentments, behind all my fears, behind all my sex or lack of it, and behind all my harms, I'm a selfish guy, and I'm a fearful guy, and I'm a resentful guy. But I'm not dishonest. No. I'm a CPA. I'm a financial officer. No, I'm not dishonest. No D word on my inventory. No. And so I shared it with my sponsor, and it was long. It was thorough. And I got done, and I went back to Detroit. He was in Chicago. And he called up one night and he said, what step are you working on? I said, well, getting into 6 and 7. He said, how long are they? I said, well, they're not very long. He said, they're 2 paragraphs. You're done. I said, well, it's 2 paragraphs. You're done. And so, what? Mark, you spent months going through doing your 4th step. You spent hours going through a 5th step. What part of selfishness do you want to hang on to? None. What part of fear do you want to hang on to? None. What part of resentments did you want to hang on to? None. How about dishonesty? Well, no, I don't have any dishonesty, but I says, well, why don't you do something? Do you think God of your understanding, infinite God rather than finite self, a spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things? Do you think that kind of a God could take these things, every one? Yeah. Well, then why don't you do something really, really, really humble in step 7? Go to Bali? No. Go to Chiang Mai? No. Go to a native sweat lodge? No. Go to an ashram? No. Why don't you do something really simple, really humble? Ask him. Step 7, humbly ask him. And so I asked God, take it to the Lord in prayer. Real simple. He pushed me through these steps. And I was out there a couple of weeks and he said, Mark, need to talk to you. And he said, I'm hearing you you need to go back and do another inventory. You need to do a 4-step inventory. And said, oh, no. No, he said, listen up. He said, you're complaining a lot about your wife, a lot of resentments, and you've got a disabled son. And I hear a lot of fear about your son. And I want you to look at fears on your son. And I want you to look at resentment on your wife. He said, I've seen your wife. He said, she doesn't have horns, a pointed tail, and hooves. She's not some mythological creature, but that's how you talk about her. And he says, you need to take a look at that. And so I looked at these things and I found out that I was dishonest. If I'm on the basis of trusting infinite God, why am I worried about my son? And if I am trusting God, what's all about this resentment? Why can't I let people be people and let my wife be who she is? And I had to change. And so I found the D word. And I find out that more than anything else, if I've got fear, if I got resentments, if I've got selfishness, I'm probably being dishonest about something. One of the circuit speakers, I think it was Clancy, says, act on a lie and you'll meet the truth. And when I act on false information, I'm probably going to meet the truth. So I worked across those steps. And then they get to step 8 and it says, we have a list of persons we've harmed. We made it when we took inventory. Oh, it says that in the book. Yeah, it does. My sponsor gave me some note cards and he said, here's about 4 or 5 cards. Hang on to these. You're going to need them when you get to step 8. He gave me some cards because he kept asking me, did you harm them? Did you harm them? Did you harm them? And he gave me a card with a bunch of names on it. And I got that out of step 5 because that's what the book says. And then we get up in step 9, which is a lot of pages in the big book. And it says, there's a long period of reconstruction ahead. How long? A long period. A remorseful mumbling, sorry, won't fill a bill at all. They don't want to hear sorry. They've seen sorry. They want to see change. They don't want to hear sorry. They want to see the cash. And so I had to go back and make those amends. And before I was halfway through, I started to get those promises. And it gets me up to step 10 and says, this thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take inventory and continue to set right mistakes as we go along. We commenced this way of living, this step 10 way of living, as we cleaned up the past. I start 10 right away, even when I'm doing 9. We commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past. I got to take care of old wreckage, and I got to stay vigilant and take care of new wreckage. We start step 10 as we cleaned up the past. Continue to watch for hungry, angry, lonely, tired. It doesn't say that. That's a cute acronym. But what does it say? Mark, continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. Why? Because they block me from having a relationship with God. And that's not a good idea. When these crop up, we call our sponsor at once and whine. It doesn't say that. When these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them, period. I remember calling my sponsor up and getting him off the floor in a big box store. And he said, what's up? And I said, well, yeah, my job, my wife, this, a kid. And he says, did you pray about it? And I said, no, I was calling you up to tell you. He says, I think you should go pray about it. And he kept sending me back, take it to God first. He is not my higher power. He's my sponsor, and he guides me through the steps out of the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And I did that, and I changed. Then we talk to someone quickly and make amends immediately if we've harmed anyone. No commas in that sentence. I don't need to go talk to someone else all the time. I just took it to the Lord in prayer. He's real efficient. He takes it away right away. I trust a higher power. And so that got me through step 10. I get up into step 11, tells me what to do at night, what to do in the morning, what to do as I go through the day. He said, oh, prayer and meditation. I bet it's going to tell you what books to read and where to go. No, it's I think it's about 2.5 pages long. And it's not going to tell me how to pray. It's not going to tell me how to meditate, but it is going to tell me one thing all through there. It's going to tell me to watch for what's blocking me. Continue it. When we retire at night, we constructively review our day. It says, were we selfish, dishonest, afraid, and fearful? Those kind of words. Upon awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. Bad idea. We consider our plans for the day. Another bad idea. Third sentence, before we begin. Well, why don't you put that sentence first? Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking. Well, that's a good idea. And I do that every morning. I ask God to direct my thinking. How? Well, I especially ask that my thinking, be divorced from self-pity, not separated. I'm talking divorced from self-pity, dishonest, and self-seeking motives. Under such conditions, we can engage our mental faculties, our thinking with assurance. For after all, God gave us brains to use. Our thought life will be placed on a much higher plane when our thinking's clear of wrong motives. I do that every single morning. It's a good day out there in Scottsdale, Arizona, where I'm talking from this morning. It's just when am I going to get up and get out of my lethargy and quit whining about my stuff and go out there and claim the manna that's all over the ground? Yeah. Avoid the deliberate manufacture of misery. And so I do step 10 and 11 all the time. And then it tells me that, hey, Mark, nothing will so much ensure your immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when other measures fail. You need to get out of yourself and go out and carry the message forward. Are you sure? Well, what does step 12 say? Well, let's see. I think it says, having had a spiritual awakening, a change, a profound change, a change sufficient to recover from alcoholism, as the result of these steps, that's what I get, comma, try to carry this message to alcoholics. Should I tell them about my cat? Try to carry this message to alcoholics. Oh. And practice these principles in all our affairs. I don't go far off that script. I drank for 30 years from age 16 to age 46. I came in here at 46 and I've been sober 26 years, 9 months, and almost 10 months. No relapses. And I have a very large, full life as the result of these steps. So my first year, I went to 375 meetings. I got those sheets signed. Then the next 9 years, I went to 400 meetings a year, all over the United States. Detroit, Chicago, Atlanta, many other places. And then I got a job that took me opportunity to go overseas. And I would go overseas for the next 12 years. And I physically resided for 10 of the next 12 years overseas. I spent 1 full year in the country of Oman, near Saudi Arabia, Dubai, and Abu Dhabi. And I spent 2 years in the country of Libya, in the cities of Tripoli and Benghazi. And so, Atakalam Arabi Shwaya, I've learned a little bit of Arabic. And willing to go to any lengths means you get on an airplane, you go to Malta, you go to Rome, you go to Istanbul, you go to Spain, Germany. I've traveled all over Europe going to AA meetings, and North Africa and the Middle East. And then the Arab Spring kind of caught on over in Libya, and it became unwise to stay there. And my boss had changed jobs, and he asked me if I wanted to stay overseas. And I said, yeah. He said, how'd you like to go to China? And so I took the job. I transferred with him and went to China, and I worked out in the middle of China. And a town that nobody's ever heard of. I was about an hour and a half by fast train from this town of 10 million that no one had heard of. And now everybody's heard of it. Wuhan, like Wuhan coronavirus. And I spent 5.5 years out there. So, Wang by Zhongwen Dian. So I understand a little bit of Mandarin Chinese also. And that took me traveling all over Asia. So I've traveled all over Asia to meetings, and frequently to Hong Kong and Bangkok and Manila, and just all over the place. Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, you name it. And lots of meetings in lots of countries. Carry a simple message of how I recovered. A lot of international conventions, a lot of sponsors or sponsees all over the world. Mark, try to carry this message to other alcoholics and practice these principles in all our affairs. And so that's the stuff I did. Now I'm back in the States, and I have a couple homes, one up north and one in Arizona. I work out in Arizona. I go to set up about 16 meetings a week in 4 different lands. And there are Zoom and there's some in person. I chair meetings. I sponsor guys. I try to help. I have some watchwords. I'm real big on God over group. Big time. God over group. If you understand that, you'll understand Mark. I'm big time on higher power over human power. I'm big on principles over personalities. I'm big on message over meetings. I go to a lot of meetings, but you won't hear me say meeting makers make it. I'm real big on message. I'm real big on action over motion. There isn't a chapter called Into Motion. It's called Into Action. It's the steps. I'm big on recovery over just about everything else. Service is important, but book tells me that the moment I put my work on a service basis, the alcoholic commences to depend upon me rather than God. And I should burn the idea into the consciousness of every man that he can recover regardless of anyone. The only requirement is he trusts God and clean house. Job or no job, wife or no wife, we simply do not recover as long as we place dependence on people ahead of dependence on God. I rely on people. I have a sponsor who has a sponsor. I rely on people. I go to meetings, but never ahead of dependence on God. No matter where I go, no matter what I do, God, in my understanding, is already there. And I can go anywhere on the planet without worry, without concern, because God, in my understanding, is already there. And he keeps me safe and protected. So I've talked, and I try to think of others rather than self. I get up in the morning and I just have one goal. How can I help?
Everything you do, the answer lies inside you.